Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Like Literary.
Like literarily.
Like literally.
Like
Like
literally.
literally. I
The
am
echo.
one of your hosts, Alysha.
I'm your other host, Alexis, better known as Momo.
And I'm Rylee from Rylee Tries Hobbies on Instagram. So this month's topic, we decided to pick a women's author for Women's History Month. Happy Women's History Month. But our book is Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Coopersmith. And this is episode 20, so that's very exciting. Happy Women's History Month, everyone.
Woo! Women!
Whoop, whoop. So we're going to go ahead and give a brief introduction of the book, and then, as always, we'll cover some of our thoughts on the book. We'll explore some of our own opinions of different topics brought up during it, as well as discuss the genre a little bit, and we'll close out with our general ratings and final thoughts. And so, Rylee, do you mind giving us the summary of the book?
Absolutely. So this is from the Storygraph, but the Storygraph summary is really long, so we kind of shortened it up a little bit. But our summary is a century of Vietnam's history and folklore comes to life in this brilliant, sweeping epic that swaps spirits and sheds time like snakeskin. Basically, two young women go missing decades apart. Both are fearless, both are lost, and both will have their revenge. So in 1986, the teenage daughter of a wealthy Vietnamese family loses her way in an abandoned rubber plantation while fleeing her angry father and is forever changed. And then in 2011, a young, unhappy Vietnamese American woman disappears from her home in Saigon without a trace. The fates of these two women are inexplicit. I can't say that, but they're linked, bound together by past generations, by ghosts and ancestors, by the history of possessed bodies and possessed lands.
Man, so I think the first question's obvious. Do you all believe in ghosts?
Yes. But specifically because my best friend growing up, her house was definitely haunted by her mom's uncle who was her mom's brother, sorry, who was in the Navy. And literally we were terrified of her basement. I'm pretty sure like in like the wood paneling, like a face would form, and we were like, yeah, no. That's a no for me. And I just grew up watching way too many documentaries and stuff about exorcisms and grew up in a Catholic church and everything else. So, but I feel like Rylee has a story I'm kind of scared to hear, but also I'm intrigued to hear.
It's not scary. So I also grew up Catholic, so I think I just, vibe with this stuff. Anyway, but I 100% had a ghost cat in Georgia in our house in Augusta. So my cat Gus, Susie didn't entertain the ghost, but my cat Gus would like be running up and down the hallway a lot. And we were like, oh, he's playing with Susie. And then we would look and he's like playing by himself. And we're like, oh, that's weird. He doesn't usually do that. And then my toilet paper roll in our bathrooms would like randomly like unravel, which you would think would be our cats. But like generally our cats had never done that before. So we thought that was weird when that started happening. And then one day I'm like at the computer and you could kind of see into the bathroom from there. And all of a sudden I watched the entire paper towel roll just unroll itself like a cat was playing with it. So that was really weird. Anyway, I really liked the ghost cat. I kind of hoped that he was going to follow us to Hawaii so that he would play with Gustafer. Like he didn't bother anybody. He was just vibing. He was happy to be around. But yeah, I genuinely think we had a ghost cat, or just like a ghost that was unrolling our toilet paper. But I like to think it was a cat because that makes sense why Gus and the ghost cat would, chase each other and play. I thought it was cute. I liked our ghost cat.
I kind of wish for you that he like the ghost cat like attached himself to one of your cats or you and went with, but I guess it's associated with the house.
I guess so. I don't know. I liked our ghost cat. I should have named it, but I didn't because I'm not gonna like guess some ghost cat's name and then to be offended.
You should have gotten a Ouija board and been like, "All right, ghost cat, what's your name?"
I don't vibe with that. That I'm not messing with.
I feel
What
like
about you, Alysha?
that's a good transition. It's like I'm fairly indifferent to ghosts, where like if somebody tells me they have a ghost story, I'm like, yeah, I believe you. You experienced that and that could have been a ghost. I will not mess with the Ouija boards. That is a no-go.
Same. I am not vibing with that. I also remember at Camp Atterbury, Alexis, when we would go for training. There was that was a creepy place, first of all, but also
Muscatatuck.
yeah, Muscatatuck Urban Training Center. You're right. Anyway, but I remember Rebecca, she had her camera and she was taking pictures everywhere. There was orbs in so many of those pictures. It was so creepy. And it was like
In
a
that
brand
creepy
new camera.
hospital.
Yeah. So weird.
They really had us sleeping in that creepy hospital. That was definitely haunted.
Yeah. 1000%.
So, before we jump into our thoughts on this book, I think there's one more general discussion point we have to have. What results in a did not finish DNF book for you all?
Okay, so I'll go first just because I feel like I do this more often than you two do. Basically, if I'm not vibing with a book, or especially if because I'll usually try to listen and read a book just to see if that will help me get through a book. But if I'm like trying to listen to a book and I keep spacing out, or I keep missing what happened, or keep having to go back to re-listen to something, that usually means I'm just not into it, which is fine. I usually do try to give it until like a couple chapters in, but so I got all the way up to 26% in this book specifically. But yeah, if I'm just like not vibing with it, I'm not going to waste my time. So I'll just put it down. But yeah, the big telltale sign for me is if I switch from audiobook to reading, or reading to audiobook, and that doesn't help, and then if I just keep having to reread or re-listen, I'm just going to no-go it. But yeah. What about you, Alysha? We'll end with Alexis since this is her first did not finish book.
So I've also only DNF'd one book, and
What?
so I think Alexis and I probably have like a fairly similar view. I think where we diverge a bit is on the idea of series. So like for me, I will largely finish a book even if I'm not vibing with it out of like the curiosity. I'm like, why? Why did other people like this book? So particularly for me, the one that stands out is I read Haunting Adeline and it was so bad in my opinion. And I was like, I don't why. And like there's no way you can convince me to read that second book. Like that's probably a worse example because that was just rough all around. But I generally will make my way through whatever book, but I may not finish the series if I was not vibing with it.
Haunting Adeline was one of the worst books I have ever read in my entire life. I think I literally finished it for the same reason. Why do people actually like this? And then I got to the end and went, what the hell was that? um, but yeah, no, this is the first book I've ever DNF'd. I guess for the sake of like I just didn't finish it for the pod, and I usually always have the book read before we record. But also like I just don't know if I'm gonna try to finish it. I borrowed it from the library and then I bought the cheap copy off the Kindle because I don't think that there was a digital copy to borrow. But I don't know. I just cannot get into this like much at all. I think most series or most books I try to read just to say, like, so then people can't come back to me and be like, oh, well, you didn't finish it. Just finish it and you'll probably feel differently. No, I did finish it and it was terrible. I.e., that was Akatar for me. But I don't know. I guess like I don't really have a criteria set right now. But I guess I would probably be along the lines of both of you. Like, am I curious enough to finish this and hope that it's worth it? Or am I like Rylee, where I keep having to go back and re-listen to what I was listening to, or I just read like 10 pages and I forgot what I even just read. Maybe I should just give it up. I think most of the time if I DNF anything again, it'll probably be like if it's something for like this or the stream that I do, and like I'm on like a time crunch, and if I just can't finish it, I might just have to chalk it up and say I'm not going to. But yeah, I don't usually like to DNF. I like to just see things through. So this was a first for me.
So yeah, obviously with that, 2 out of 3 of us did DNF this book, but we're still gonna chat about our thoughts up till whatever we each read. And Alexis, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I can. So as you all know, obviously, like I just said, I didn't finish it. Um, if you didn't catch the reference, I did do the digital copy on the Kindle, and then I did borrow the audiobook from the library. Overall, I just think it felt a little too dreary for me, and it just really wasn't for me. I think it felt a little too heavy. Maybe when I have a lot less going on mentally, I'll be able to keep up with it a little bit more. Or honestly, I might just need like the actual paperback or hardcover because I kept losing track of who was who because there's literally like a zillion characters. So with the audiobook and with the Kindle, I just felt like I didn't have an easy way to go back and reference because there's like a whole chart at the beginning. So if you are listening to this and you've read it before and you read the hard copy, you'll know that at the beginning there's like a whole breakdown of what characters belong to what family and like I think what area. Um and so I kept being like, who is this? Wait, who is that again? How are they connected? Why do we know who this person is? And so obviously, like I said, I think overall if was going through a lot less like in my personal stuff, um I might have been able to have that reference. And then I think too, if I had the hard copy, maybe I could have like had that tabbed and then just kind of flip like, wait, who is this again? And had a quick reference for myself as like a reminder. And then also I just felt like the book overall just was really heavy with a lot of emotions. And I already kind of have a lot of that going on myself. So with her having like severe depression and just being generally unhappy with majority of her life, I was like, yeah, I don't know if I can keep reading this. This is tough for me. So I think that's like my general thing. Maybe eventually I'll go back like when things are a little bit more light in my personal stuff. So then that way I could kind of handle more of Winnie's like heavier capacity. But right now, I was trying to Google what happened at the ending, so I didn't have to get that far. But I guess I'll just have Alysha spoil it for me while she gives us her side.
I mean, I don't even know if I really have anything to spoil. Even with finishing the book, I kind of left off with very similar feelings. So I'm usually a big fan of like a multiple point of view book. I don't mind when we're jumping around in a timeline. So I was really excited for this book kicking off, being like, we're going to have all these different perspectives, this interweaving story across like generations and time and space. I was like, this is going to be so cool. And you can tell very early on in the book that like we are starting to weave together these different timelines and characters. And so I felt rather optimistic, but very much was not getting into the story. I wasn't particularly feeling anything for the characters. It felt like we were linking together this larger story, but I wasn't feeling particularly connected with any one part of that story, which was making it rather difficult for me to fully feel invested. Um, and so I wish there was, I mean, there's so much, it's all world building, but like I almost feel like there was more character. I wish there was more character development amongst those characters, so I would have felt a bit more connected to them. I will say, as far as the time jumping did go, I was probably like a quarter away through the book and was like, I probably should be keeping track a little better about where we are in this timeline. But I just went in with the vibes. I was like, we'll figure it out as we go. I didn't jump in with like the world's most critical thinking lens for this one. So yeah, I think the other thing for me um was I did open this thinking it was going to be like a full fantasy novel. There's like Alexis was saying, there's maps when you open it. I was getting really excited. Turns out it was magical realism, and we can chat about that some after Rylee shares her opinions.
So for me, I opened this book and Alysha had been here the week before, so I already kind of knew her vibes on it. I think I read like the first chapter or something before you got here. And then I just kept listening to it, and yeah, so basically I had like no connection to these characters. I didn't feel any investment into them. Like, I have read similar books. So I've read The Daughter of Dr. Moreau and Vexing Gothic, which I do think are fairly similar. And if you really enjoyed those books, I do think you would enjoy this one. But those for me were also like just okay. I agree with Alysha. Like, the magical realism stuff isn't like usually my thing. And I don't know, there's just like a lot going on, and I had no investment in the characters, and it just wasn't my vibe. And I do think this is the vibe for some people, and I think I would maybe come back to this book in like the fall, maybe when I'm feeling something a little bit more spooky. But right now, I don't know, it just wasn't my thing.
Yeah, I don't mind the magical realism, but I feel like it has to be done in a specific manner, I guess. Um, like I feel like it's either got to feel like a practical magic kind of vibe, or it's got to be more like I read Slewfoot, and I feel like that would be more like magical realism slash religion Puritan, because that's like obviously when it took place was in more Puritan, like early, America. So but one thing I was gonna add that I guess I didn't mind, and that was I guess a more positive element, was a lot of what when he was going through about like feeling not enough Asian but not enough American, depending on where she was at, is something that I've experienced from being Puerto Rican Italian, but I was born in America. Like I was too American and quote unquote like whitewashed to hang out with the Hispanic kids who spoke Spanish, were first generation, everything else. But then when I went and hung out with my white friends, it was like, you're too Hispanic. And I was like, I can't win here. Which one am I supposed to hang out with? So I did get her a little bit, and I definitely, that was like one of the things I think I felt for her a little bit, but I don't think I ever let that get to me in the way that she did. But I know that there's different cultural pressures and stuff like that. And obviously, with her being one of four, she's kind of like the forgotten about youngest kid. I think she said she had like three older siblings that were all super successful, and I was the only kid. But, um, but yeah, I guess that was like the more realistic element that I guess I related to, that I liked that she talked about and that she did, because that's a pretty big subject, especially across, like minority American cultures, where you're like trying to stay in touch with your family's culture, but they want you to assimilate into America. And then, like, what's the balance? So she goes to Vietnam to try to find this like piece of herself or whatever. But after that, when all the magical stuff and the timeline came in, I was like, okay, yeah, no, now I'm lost.
So that's what I was going to add. There was at the beginning this buildup of like backstory and connection to the character, but like everything you just mentioned happens in like the first three chapters, and we stop losing that like depth around the characters as more and more introduced, and even as we continue to follow Winnie through her story. And so I was fairly excited the first few chapters. Unfortunately, I was not able to keep that excitement moving through. So I did want to circle back on the magical realism versus fantasy. But maybe first, Alexis, I think you found a definition of magical realism. Do you mind sharing with the group?
Yes, of course. So I did a little Googling because I didn't know what the actual magical realism definition was. So, magical realism is a style or genre of fiction, and it can be of art, that presents a realistic view of the world while incorporating magical elements, often blurring the lines between speculation and reality. So essentially, it's like this general sense of real life, but with this magical or witchy or hoodoo kind of feel to it, which obviously people believe in real life. So then I was curious, because then I was like, well, what's the difference between fantasy versus magical realism? And magical realism, literally the main difference is magical realism will incorporate fantastical elements into a realistic setting. So essentially, this story could take place in Salem, Massachusetts, and they're all witches, and then there's like this maybe fantasy portal that they travel to, but they come back to Salem, but we all recognize Salem, Massachusetts exists in real life, versus fantasy will create an entirely imagined world of their own rules and logic and is entirely fictional and different from our own. So where Fourth Wing, for example, or Akatar, like those are completely fantasy worlds that might share elements of and inspiration from what we know in real life, but overall, these are completely different rules, worlds, timelines, makeups, etc. So that's essentially the general differences and things to know, I guess.
Yeah, and I think for magical realism and my general understanding, because as I mentioned earlier, I typically go more fantasy, is like magical realism usually has more subtle, like magical elements, and it's not necessarily the point of the story, or if it is, it's probably serving in some kind of metaphorical way that is over my head, which I wouldn't be completely surprised if that happened in this book. I did read this book in like one entire sitting on the plane, which may have been a little quick. um, but I just want to be thrown into a completely new world. I want all the world building into it. I just want to be, yeah, whole new space. I find that just personally way more entertaining than the magical realism. I feel like I don't read a lot of just general literary fiction. Like I like romance books, but there's that contemporary, is that the genre of just like people's lives?
Yeah, contemporary fiction.
Right. So that already kind of, I guess, makes the magical realism less appealing too.
Yeah, I genuinely just don't think that it would have been a bad idea. Like more modern day Vietnam is not bad. And it seems like a lot of what the magical realism was some of their like cultural beliefs, but I couldn't quite get a grasp of what it was I was supposed to believe with them and that was happening to them because I don't know a lot about the culture specifically. So I feel like when the author wrote this, it was definitely like, if you're reading this, you probably know what I'm talking about. But I didn't know what they were talking about. And that's what it kind of felt like.
Yeah, that's what, like my best guess for the ghosts were, and I mean, I'm pretty sure this is off of a keyword in like the book description on the back of it. Um, but like it's supposed to be following generational trauma, and we are flipping through these different generations through the different timelines, and so I felt like they were supposed to be a somewhat physical representation of that trauma because the ghosts were always kind of scary or kind of bad throughout the story. And then even when something would like escape, it was generally viewed as good. But I still struggled with like it felt like just emotions that I was already also getting from the characters without the ghosts being present.
So, spoiler alert, why did she disappear? Because I didn't get that far.
The one from like the plantations,
Either any of them.
either any of them. I mean, it was very unclear to me, to be fully honest. So, well, like the one, like kind of just like went into the woods, and then I think her ghost was, yeah, the trauma over the whole rubber tree plantation and the exploitation, and like she was just supposed to kind of like represent that moment in time as like a person in the future as part of that time jump trauma thing.
Uh,
As far as Winnie, I think it was kind of what you're speaking towards, just like not living up to what she felt were expected pressures. Um, and so hers was more of like a fading, but that was still your intergenerational from parents to child trauma,
mm.
probably. I don't know. I think it was all just supposed to be
And
read.
also, didn't she like turn into something,
Yes.
right? Like her energy. like morphed into something.
There was something like that at the end. I can't really fully describe what happened. But yes.
General, the general question for our listeners is: if you read this, do you know what happened? Let us know.
So wait, did like the girl, the modern day girl, did she come back from being missing or did she just stay missing?
I assume she stayed missing.
Yeah, I
Okay.
thought because she morphed into question mark, question mark, question mark, she never went back. And so they never
Okay.
found her, I guess.
Well, Alexis, when did there's this whole thing about like swapping bodies into animals like 3/4 of the way through.
Yeah. I think I just listened to that part because she referenced it because I Googled the ending because remember I was trying to figure out what the heck happens in this book. And it said something about how she like morphs into something. And then I kind of was starting to get to that illusion that that was probably what's going to happen because when she was talking to the snake, she was like trying to Harry Potter it. She was like, what if I just like forced myself through here and we could trade places? And I was like, what? Okay.
Yeah, so I kind of feel like she just like, yeah, released that energy.
Fascinating.
It was a wild ride. Like, I was obviously intrigued enough to finish, but there was a lot going on that I feel like I needed my middle school English teachers back to help me unpack the symbolism
I
and
know. I feel like I needed
metaphors.
an English teacher to be like, are the curtains purple? What are they representing? They're not just the color of grapes. It represents the bruises of the family. And I'm like, that's what I needed in this book.
I did too. This was not the book to pick, I'm here for vibes, and we're reading this on the plane. That was definitely a choice.
Well, do we want to go through our very final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yeah.
All right. Well, my final thought is that I didn't finish the book, so I'm not going to give it a rating. I'm just going to say I didn't finish it. I'll see if I feel like coming back to it in the fall. I doubt it, because that whole thing that you just described, Alysha, that I don't get it. It seems like a waste of my time. I have other things to do. Alrighty. Momo?
Yeah. Also, no rating for me since I didn't finish either. But I was curious how it generally was doing on the internet. And most ratings that I saw on Goodreads were low, like when I first pulled it up. But the general consensus is that it's like a 3.81. But I guess they're better than me because not for me. What about you, Alysha?
You know, I think I didn't actually put my exact rating into our meeting notes, but I feel like I was right around there. I still think I gave it. We're just gonna look it up.
I looked you
Yeah.
up earlier. You gave it a 3.75.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, I feel like I still gave it a 3.75. I do think a bit of my brain went, I put Jane Eyre at 4.
Okay, fair.
And and I was kind of going off of that. Like I remember distinctively having that thought while trying to
So,
place this book.
Alysha, as the only person who finished this book for this episode, would you generally recommend this book to anyone, or more specifically, our listeners? Or do you think you'd be like, it was okay, beware, but that's your decision, not mine? Or would you be like, avoid this at all costs?
If somebody came to me knowing the name of the book and said, "Should I read this?" I would say, "Yeah, I think you should give it a go." But I wouldn't like heavily influence them, yes or no. If I was just providing book recommendations, this would not escape into that list. Um, I'm sure it has its place, and I think you need to go into this one not being a vibes reader. I think that's like the shortest advice I could give for it.
I do feel like, based on having read The Daughter of Dr. Moreau and Mexican Gothic, if you really enjoyed those books, I think you would enjoy this one.
I also think that if you are someone who is Asian American, this book would probably resonate with you a lot more specifically, obviously, Vietnamese American. Otherwise, I feel like because of the way that the author wrote the book with very much so who her targeted audience was in mind, if you're outside of that, you're a little like lost, I guess. So it would have been nice, I think, to get a little bit more general background information about what I was supposed to know. But then again, I guess like because I wasn't specifically this targeted audience, I wasn't going to understand the depths of it, I guess, as much. But maybe if I read a book like Mexican Gothic, I might resonate with that one a little bit more, being Puerto Rican. So, but overall, I mean, I won't say I hate it because I don't think it was bad. I just don't think it was written for me with me in mind, really and generally.
Well, with that, I think that's our thoughts on this month's novel. So this was Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Cooper Smith. And
Yeah.
that was our choice for Women's History Month.
And I have to say, I love how many different like genres and authors that we've discovered with this podcast, and how, with these different month celebrations, it's exposed us to read all these different books and like about people's experiences, because last Women's History Month we read all the different memoirs. So overall, I would never chalk this up to a bad experience. And like Alysha said, if you know the book, go read it if and check it out if you want to. And yeah, I think overall I think it's an enriching experience, and I don't look at any reading this negatively by any means.
Yeah, and thinking of enriching experiences, our book for next month is a book I've surprisingly never read.
Same here.
Yeah, next month we're going to be covering Pride and Prejudice for April's episode. I have listened to this book before. If you're somebody who doesn't like reading old books, I do highly recommend the audiobooks for this if you would like to read along with us. I even have a little Jane Austen puzzle that I could do while I listen to the books now, because I really enjoy it. But yeah, that's what we're covering.
Rylee's going full aesthetic for the spring.
I'm trying.
Well, I think that's it for today, everyone.
Alrighty.
Bye.
Nailed it.
Now all I'm going to think of is that meme where it's like how to spot a millennial.
Bye. Bye.